You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Helen Mackenzie and today is Friday, November the 3rd, 2023.
6.
This week's Procurement 6 is brought to you by Airbase. The idea of guided buying certainly isn't new to procurement. What may be new is why we might want to embrace it. Instead of responding to stakeholders who demand more purchasing independence, procurement should think about guided buying as a way to deliver value-oriented benefits to everyone in the company. According to recent analysis by Patrick Raymond, who's the Research Director, Procurement and Enterprise Applications at IDC, guided buying is gaining traction as a means to drive transparency, increase policy adherence, and even emphasise collaboration. Learn more about the opportunities associated with guided buying by downloading the IDC Spotlight paper using the link in today's show notes.
5.
In this week's podcast, Philip Ideson spoke to Hackett Group's Andy Wazaka, Chris Sawchuk and Rich Gardner about the challenge of evaluating P2P solution providers. Now, it's critical for procurement to tailor how they assess and select their tech solutions to the specific needs and expectations of their stakeholders. So I was really interested to hear how the newly developed Hackett Value Matrix can help to create new opportunities for innovation and improvement. In the extract I've chosen for you today, Phil first hears from Andy and then Chris on how to work out what AI is actually being included in the product and what might just be hype. Let's take a listen.
What's interesting to me, I think, is for somebody who's buying procurement technology is how to separate the hype from the reality, because every provider is going to be talking about AI, because to not do so puts them at a competitive disadvantage, at least in their positioning. But the reality on the ground may be different. I mean, are there any red flags or questions or kind of any advice that you can give on how to differentiate a company that's really that is talking the talk, so to speak, and one that it's in positioning, but it's not necessarily in the product?
Yeah, I think you've got to be careful here, because fundamentally, when you're looking at a purchase-to-pay solution, in the procurement areas for organizations, there's still fundamental things that you're trying to get out of those environments. Greater speed, greater visibility across the purchasing channels, and the like. So those things still remain core. So, I would give you advice and don't get distracted by the new bells and whistles. Mm-hmm. You still have to focus on those core fundamental areas and the difference that it's going to make to your environment in the procurement cycles. But there are augmentations that are going to be happening at a relatively fast pace across all the vendors. Yeah. So advice, don't get distracted by the bells and whistles. Mm-hmm. Focus on the core competencies and the returns. This whole collection of vendors have done a very good job of providing return on investment. So implementation partners become critical, but don't get overly distracted by the AI hype.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, Phil, I would just add one, comment to what Andy has said, is that it goes back to, what we were talking about earlier around the performance, the objectives of why you implemented something in the first place. Why did you put a solution in? And whatever AI does, or generative AI, it has to impact those. And so don't lose sight of why you're doing or implementing or investing in a particular area. If generative AI is coming in versus, it's just a label, to your point, everyone has to answer the question of what are you doing and how are you leveraging and how are you integrating AI or generative AI into your product? Everyone is doing that. The question is, how is it impacting the things that you were doing before, the kind of value that you're creating? Mm-hmm. How is it making that even better in this new environment once you've adopted that? And to me, that will be the difference in terms of how well they're doing it. And it's more than just hype.
There's lots more great advice in the podcast, so check out the full episode using the link in the show notes.
4.
Can 3 become 1? Absolutely. particularly when that means the Art of Procurement family is growing. I was delighted to hear the news this week that Art of Procurement has acquired Buyers Meeting Point and My Purchasing Centre. Now, the acquisition creates a multi-brand, multi-channel procurement and supply management focused media organisation, and that's supported by a community of over 50,000 procurement and supply chain professionals. And it's got a back catalogue of over 2,500 freely available podcasts, videos and educational articles. Now, speaking about the move, our MD Philip Ideson explained that the acquisition provides the platform for Art of Procurement's growth into adjacent verticals, where we will continue to apply our market-leading ideation and content creation process to help inspire, guide and advise the procurement leaders of today and tomorrow. It really is an exciting time to be part of AOP.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
How many times has a stakeholder told you that they can find something you've sourced cheaper? Monthly, weekly, or even daily perhaps? Well, that challenge was the topic of a great post I saw on LinkedIn by Mary Ruth Williamson, where she used images of the Mona Lisa and a rather cute but nowhere near copy to illustrate her point. I found it cheaper is rarely an apples to apples comparison, Mary Ruth reports. Now check out those commenting who are sharing great examples and advice. Use the link that we've put in the show notes.
2.
As human beings, being able to read and use non-verbal cues can determine the outcome of a situation, keeping us safe or strengthening the bonds we build with those around us. For procurement professionals in particular, being aware of non-verbal communication is absolutely essential, especially in the situations of high intensity or where first impressions make the difference in measurable outcomes. So that makes this week's episode of The Sourcing Hero, where Kelly Barner speaks to procurement training specialist Laura Scarf, a must listen. During their conversation, Laura sheds light on a number of non-verbal cues, including the role that clothing has to play in how we're perceived. Check out the full episode using the link in the show notes.
1.
Here at Art of Procurement, we're on a mission to 10x the impact of procurement. But we're not looking for continuous incremental improvements. Procurement's been delivering those for years. Instead, we're looking to lead step change, we're looking to introduce new perspectives and embrace a completely transformed approach to measuring procurement's impact. None of us should expect this mission to be easy. It's going to take all of us combining our greatest strengths, deepest experience and competitive spirit to see it through. And to take that mission forward, we'll be doing just that next week. So make sure you join us for Mastermind Live 2023 as we collectively imagine the art of the possible and then do whatever it takes to make that a reality. Register now and join us by heading over to artofprocurement.com/calendar.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.